Thanks, Ernie. Appreciate it.
I, I tried to gloss it up a little bit for you, do my best. Hey, so I'll get started easy. So what was the biggest challenge that you had to face getting out of the military? What was the main hurdle?
You know, I'll be honest. I had what I would say was a pretty easy transition. So my last active duty station was at the Pentagon, doing requirements and procurement for the Air National Guard. And as I was coming up on the end of that tour, I had a company that approached me and asked me to come work for them on the outside. So I had about 45 days of terminal leave. Got to spend some time with the family, and then went to work. Went out, bought a couple of cheap suits, and went to work with them right afterwards. So, and that was a pretty smooth transition. Did a lot of the same things kind of across the hall that I did while I was in the Pentagon. So overall, it was a pretty smooth, pretty quick transition. But I would say in general, learning how to apply those skills that I thought were so critical when I was in the military, how those applied to the commercial or civilian sector was a bit of a challenge. So, I knew I wanted to contribute. I knew I wanted to be part of something bigger, still give back to the country, still give back to the servicemen and women. So learning, how flying an A-10 applied in the civilian world was a bit of a challenge, and it took some time, but not impossible.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a transition there, going from attack to like, hey, let's make some other stuff. What was the work you're doing with the company when you first got out? What
Uh,
company was it?
so that was an engineering company, did a lot of aircraft modernization and test support, particularly for the Air Force. So if an airplane needed a new radar, new radio, new whatever, they would come to us. We would do the engineering work with the different test centers to get that technology put on that aircraft. So it was a lot of the same sort of work I did when I was at the Pentagon, just with a suit on versus a flight suit.
Yeah, not a bad deal. So, I mean, was there a moment in your life where you're like, yeah, it's time to punch out and pivot?
Yeah, I had a great career. I enlisted when I was 18. Got to do intel work. Got to be an intel officer. Then I got to fly and then work at the Pentagon. Bunch of great schools. 4 or 5 operational deployments to the Middle East, to Europe, all sorts of cool, crazy, awesome things. But at that point, my family needed me home, not deployed again, not going off to Texas to do some other school or something like that. So it really was a family decision for me. It was the right time to I had 20 in at that point and time to move on.
So, I mean, what's the mental shift from attack pilot to, businessman? I mean, there's going to be some of those same attitudes of like, hey, go right after the problem. Did you find you had to soften some things up? I mean, how'd you adjust?
Yeah, that's a really good way to put that. I think when you're you're in a fighter squadron or flying fighter planes or attack planes, as they say, you're kind of handed the problem or at least the challenge. Like, I need you to go blow these 3 artillery pieces up, or I need you to go do this mission. That comes out from, in commander's intent or an air tasking order, whatever that is. Uh, and you can bring creativity and build a team and build a plan to go solve that. But on the civilian side, it's a lot more, especially when you're on your own. It's a lot more, what problem am I going to solve today? So no one gives you the problem. You have to go find the problem, and then figure out, is this the one I want to solve, and how do I build a plan to execute this plan?
So, I mean, I, I know I had to do it, but how tough was it to adjust from, hey, I've got these hard, rigid rules to make it happen to figure it the hell out?
Yeah, that is a challenge, and I noticed that we used to do a lot of drone work, and we still do some, and I would hire civilian drone pilots and train them as a military pilot was trained, as far as plan, brief, execute, debrief, that sort of thing. And it took me 15 years to learn how to be good at that, really, and was still learning with the last flight I took. So expecting people to be good at those things right off the bat was a bit of a challenge, something I had to get used to. Of like, oh, this 19-year-old kid with an FAA license may not be quite as qualified as me after 3,000 hours and 4 deployments in the A-10. So taking a step back and letting people develop was something I had to learn.
Yeah, it's going from instructor to dad mode kind of a thing. Like, okay, be patient. The boy's
Yeah,
learning, that kind of a thing.
and you couldn't hit them, so there was that. That was unfortunate, but no, it was we had a lot of fun, and people want to learn, people want to get better. So that was a great opportunity for both me to learn as a business owner and a manager and a leader, and for them to learn technical skills as well. So
Yeah, wall-to-wall counseling has its pluses and minuses. That's for sure. I mean, what parts of your military background do you think have served you best in business?
well, like I said, the transition was pretty smooth. So I learned a lot of program management and technical skills when I was at the Pentagon of, how to execute a contract, how to execute a test plan. So those translated over pretty easily, and that's a pretty clean translation. I think broader though, organizational skills and program management skills have really been a huge asset for me. We had a couple of VIPs come through our office about 6 months ago, and I was struggling with how to get everybody kind of think through what the battle rhythm would be and how we would go about this. And I thought back to an exercise we had done with a bunch of Army folks at one point where they did a rock drill for us. And so we set up a rock drill. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but rehearsal a concept where you step through the different phases and different moments of the operation, both spatially and temporally. So
Mhm.
okay, at 9 o'clock, I'm going to show up with the limousine with the VIPs. At 9:05, they're going to be presenting coffee. At 10:05, we're going to move them to the tour. And those sort of tools that we learned in the military were really, really useful as we brought people try to bring people up to speed and teach them program management and those kind of things.
Okay, now how about the opposite side of that question? What were the things that really screwed you up coming
Uh,
from the military? Because I mean, we learn best from our mistakes usually. I mean, I tried, but
well, I've learned a lot. Yeah, that's fair.
it didn't
Um,
always work out.
yeah, listen, I think the expectation that everybody is up to a same standard was something that I had to get used to that didn't exist. That when you walked into a room of whether it was intel analysts or fighter pilots or program managers at the Pentagon, they all had met a standard. They'd gone through a school, they had passed some sort of certification test, they were ready to go. When you're out there in the civilian world, it's very different. You can come across 6 different people with the same job title, and they will all have very different skill sets. So learning that was tough, or at least it took a little bit of patience. But it I found that the more sincere and more authentic you are, the more you interact with people, the easier those things are to overcome.
And so doing what you do now, I mean, obviously you still interact with the military, but more on the civilian side. So I mean, what civilian assumptions about veterans do you see the most and are frustrating that you have to constantly counter?
Um, I think there's enough exposure in the sectors we work in. So we work in, aviation, a little bit of emergency management, some police, fire work, and some international defense. There's enough folks in the military there that the stereotypes aren't true. They're not too negative. People generally know what to expect from a military veteran. So it's generally a positive. There are occasions that people think you're rigid or you have a certain way of approaching things that may or may not be true. So, again, getting back to my previous comment, I think if you approach things from a sincere and authentic perspective, that allows you to come true, and people will understand who you are, not just, oh, he's someone who used to be a veteran or used to be in the military.
Mhm. Yeah, sometimes you got to throw a little shade their way and go like, hey, it's help them get it.
There's some of that for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, was there something that you wish you had done differently transitioning out, or you'd say, hey, here's a cautionary tale?
Um, it's funny because this was told to me about 30 times and I blew it off. Uh, but getting your personnel stuff in order, so your VA records, your 214, having all of those things lined up and no kidding squared away before you leave is absolutely critical. And that sounds kind of, I think kind of mundane to talk about in a discussion about entrepreneurship, but we're a service disabled business, and that's a huge advantage for us. That took a little bit of ass pain, if you will, with the VA
Yeah.
to get through all that. So before you take that uniform off, make sure all of those T's are crossed and I's are dotted. That is certainly something to do. I'd also say that keeping up on your network, making sure your professional network is current. Reach out to the folks who who you've worked with, who may be out there in the industry already. Make sure you've got good contacts for them. Um, and I think the last thing I would say is, your skills and knowledge are a huge asset, but they're also they get stale quick. So finding ways to stay current, to stay engaged, and having a plan before you leave office is key. For me, I was like I said, I was a pilot. Didn't have a plan to stay current flying. Wish I had thought about that a little quicker ahead of time, so it didn't become such a burden. And I know other people have different skill sets, whether that's IT certifications or other security certifications to stay current, keep those relevant so they can be an asset to you.
Yeah. So you mentioned personnel records in there. Was there something in particular? I mean, we all know about the VA side of it because that's a nightmare, but was there something in the personnel records that you were looking for that became useful?
No, I think the biggest thing for me was the service disabled. They're able to attribute some medical conditions to deployments and things like that. But having to go back and find previous orders, and if I had kept a copy of all that stuff, like everybody ever told me to, but I blew them off. Have that stack of awards and decorations and records and orders and all those things. Have that available, and I would also recommend that be digital too. That you keep that someplace that when you move or your spouse cleans out your basement or whatever, that doesn't end up in the dumpster. You can easily find that, whether that's you know a email account that's not going to get deleted or something like that.
Yeah, I definitely support that because, doing the recruiting thing and even after it, trying to get records from St. Louis is, you're better off. You have a better chance of pulling teeth out of a dragon
Yep.
than you are going to get those. So on the business side, what inspired you to start the businesses?
Yeah, so I love being in defense, and I still do. I like being around airplanes. To quote Apocalypse Now, I love the smell of jet fuel in the morning, or something like
Close enough.
that. I like solving problems. I enjoy the people, and I love serving the country and providing. So I knew I couldn't sit in a cube. I knew I didn't want to go be a sales guy for a big defense contractor. Like I said, I worked for another engineering company for a while. I thought I could go out and build a better mousetrap and take care of people better. So there was an opportunity for me to break with them and go bid on a contract and pull that in under my own umbrella, and that's what I did.
So talking about like small defense contractors, how many of those you guys are out there? Because a lot of people they just look at the BAEs, the Boeings, the Lockheeds, the L3s. I mean, do you have an idea of just a
I
broad number?
I could not begin to guess. I'll give you a little bit of a anecdote here. So I was recently asked to become involved in I'll call it an incubator or small business development group here in Western Massachusetts that helps veterans start companies. And I always think of folks like me who either do services or professional products, things like that. But man, there are everything from print shops to there's a guy that does shredding. He shreds government or company proprietary information, veteran-owned company. People make all sorts of widgets and subcomponents to airplanes and tanks and ships. So, even here in Massachusetts, which I would not call it, a tech or a defense heavy area part of the country, it's there are countless, and I suspect in other parts of the country where there are larger military bases and larger veteran populations, it's even more.
Yeah, I mean, just driving through Westfield the other day, head to my folks' house. I mean, I drove by two.
Mhm.
Right at that one, one by Barnes and one off of another road where it's like these little contractors, most people don't understand they're out there and there's opportunities for people where they could still kind of do that stuff.
Yeah, and I
They're
think
all over
it's
the place.
a thing to keep in mind is that it's not just security or aviation. There's a ton of different industries where veterans are thriving, whether that's adjacent industries such as the shredding company I talked about. There's breweries and coffee shops and a million different places
T-shirts.
that veterans succeed. So as folks in this group are considering whether they want to go into business or what they want to do, don't limit yourself to just the traditional defense or security related areas.
Good stuff. So I mean, how'd you handle the whole nightmare on insecurity and problems of starting a company? I mean, how rough was that?
Yeah, so that was interesting. I was really fortunate because right as I was bidding on that first contract, I had an opportunity to do some consulting work that, the way I describe it is it gave me a little bit of runway there. So I was getting some income, doing some consulting work on the side while I was putting these proposals and building this team and starting, the first couple revenue generating projects. So my recommendation would be if you can do that, if you can have some kind of runway in front of you, whether it's a side hustle, it's some kind of savings, do
Retirement.
having contingencies, and I don't mean contingencies of like, oh, I didn't win that contract, I'm going to go work at Home Depot now, but having a backup plan where you've got multiple irons in the fire at one time. For every 10 contracts we bid on, we probably get responses on three of them, and maybe only one of those we use. So your success rate, depending on what industry and what sector you're in, maybe 5 or 10%. So putting all your eggs in basket on one project is pretty risky. So diversification helps to mitigate some of that risk. Multiple projects, multiple lines of business, attacking the flanks, not going after the giant $100 million contract right off the bat. Find a large business who needs your skill set or needs your particular niche, and work with them. Use 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 assets to diversify and mitigate that risk the best you can.
So talk to me about the first year of starting a business. I mean, I'm guessing sleepless nights and clipping coupons.
It's funny because that was a question I kind of anticipated. I'm looking over here at my notes here, and the first thing I see is late nights. So yeah, there was a lot of late nights. We were not didn't have the capital to go out and hire an HR person or security person or any of that stuff. So I did about 95% of that stuff on my own. The first 6 or 8 people we hired, I had to go through and do their security clearances. I acted as the facility security officer, did all their hiring, negotiated salary. So it was a very steep learning curve for me, especially for things that were not in my wheelhouse. I could talk to you all day about missiles and radars and how to do intel work and fighter planes and whatnot. But man, what workman's comp requirements are and how do I get insurance and what the DFAR requirement is on using third country labor and so got real smart on
ITAR.
yeah, the ITAR, all of that stuff. All of that stuff is going to take up a bunch of your time. And if you're small and you don't have a ton of capital, and most startups do not, you're going to have to pick up a lot of that yourself. So be expect that you'll get to do the fun work you want to do. The airplanes and tanks or whatever your passion is there, but you're going to have to do a lot of that back end work too. That unfortunately is, if for defense contracting in particular, is a requirement and kind of a necessary evil.
Well, you mentioned the funding. I mean, how did you start with the funding, the bootstrapping, loans? Was it savings that you worked off of? I mean, what are your suggestions when
Yeah, so like I
getting
said, we
started?
we had some consulting work right off the bat, so that gave us a little bit of runway that the mortgage didn't get paid and the kids didn't starve. Did
Yeah.
did have some savings that was available. Um, we didn't go after the 1,000 pound gorilla on the first contract. We found some quick wins where we knew we could build a little bit of infrastructure, hire some of those support people, and then started working the larger projects that were bigger and more challenging. So um, there's other ways to do it too. Now we have a relationship with a local banker who understands our work, and when we need a line of credit, we can go out to them. That certainly is something that I had kept away from for a long time, but man, it's nice using other people's money to grow. And it's as I was describing and presenting this to one of the bank presidents one time, and kind of lamenting how tough it was going to be for us to make this project work. He said, this is why banks are here. We hear good ideas, we loan people money, they pay us back, we make a profit, you make a profit. So that's I think that's something people tend to stay away from. A little bit of the fear of the unknown. There's some negative connotations with some of that, but using a bank or using an investor is a valid way to get capital to grow your company. And there are people out there in both the banking and private equity side who want to get involved. And if you have a good plan, that's how they make their money.
Yeah, it's funny. A buddy of mine, when I was buying my first house, he said to me like, "Hey, Ernie, the smartest thing you can do if you go into business is use other people's money to make money." And it's funny, it was 20 years ago he said that to me, and it still just rings in my head as true. I mean, you just confirmed it. because there's less risk. I mean, my credit's hurt, I got to get there, but the positive reward is like, hey, I got a new car in the driveway and the bills are paid.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
It goes a long ways. I mean, so you're saying when you had to build the company, you're doing the HR, you're doing security. I mean, did you find that there was times where your military background helped you and hurt you there?
Yeah, I think going back to kind of the program management and project management stuff where you can organize and keep things in silos and know, today I got to do this, tomorrow I got to do that, by Friday I have to accomplish this. That certainly was a skill that I learned in the military that was fantastic. But as we brought people on, learning or remembering back to the military where we had, you had a flight chief, you had a squadron commander, you had a wing commander group, up and down, what roles and responsibilities and how training plans are developed and those sort of things. Those were, they didn't directly translate, but knowing how you work people from entry level through supervisor level, for the Air Force folks out there, the 3, 5, and 7 level kind of stuff, that those were key to building training plans and development plans for our civilian workforce. So yeah, it certainly helped.
Yeah, from apprentice, journeyman, craftsman, and up. Yeah, it makes sense. It's a pretty good structure, as frustrating as it can be when you're in the Air Force and you're waiting on time.
Mhm.
But on civilian side, it does make sense. So, on kind of on the out of the box stuff, I mean, what's one unconventional piece of advice that you give to folks, transitioning out to say, hey, you probably haven't thought of this, not the LinkedIn's, not the networking, but that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
You know, I, the one thing that I wish I had a little clearer in my mind is that capitalism is good and
Well,
entrepreneurship is good. I think especially coming from a bit of a contracting background at the end of my career there, we have this $1,000 toilet gold plated toilet seat and $500 hammer and that sort of nonsense, and people who make profit are trying to rip the government off and all these sort of things, and clearly there are some unethical things that happen in defense contracting and in business.
yeah.
But what I would say is entrepreneurship. It's good. It's one of the things that makes this country great. And taking a risk and finding a new way to do things and bringing that to the government or bringing that to a customer is great. And at the end of that, you should be able to reap profits. I'm not saying rip people off. I'm not saying be unethical, but be proud of that entrepreneurial spirit. It's a great thing to have, and it's a key part of what makes this country who we are.
Well, especially, I mean, on the military side, most of us were, had it hammered home. If you could find a better way, a cheaper way to do it, make it happen. I mean, some guys took that to heart, and some other guys were like, "No, no, no, we got to blow the budget. Just spend it." I mean, do you find that kind of a attitude kind of creeps into your business where they're like, "Yeah, that's the budget. You got to blow it." I mean, do you ever see any of that?
Um, yeah, how do I say this without sounding like a jerk?
Go ahead. I know you're a jerk. It's cool.
I appreciate that. I think there are different, just like in the military, there's different types of attitudes and people who share that entrepreneurial spirit with you, and they want to go find new things, and they're always looking for new opportunities, new business, and new, better, quicker, faster ways to do things. And that's great. Those are great employees to have. Then you have others that they show up at 9, leave at 5, and happy to get a paycheck. So you need to understand what the role is for those folks. You obviously don't want to put someone like that in a business development or sales lead, but they make great accountants. So understanding people's attitudes and being able to work with that is a good skill to have.
Yeah, I mean, not everybody's a superstar, but they can still get the work done. It's just you got to put them in the right box.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it could be challenging. So, I mean, is there things that you see when you're talking to veterans where you say like, "Hey, I know what your job was, but you need to translate it a little bit better." Are there some common things where you see like, "Dude, nobody gets this unless they had a uniform on, nobody gets this."
Yeah, I think there's some pretty basic things. I try to talk to a lot of folks, especially guys who had an aviation background, and give them some some suggestions. One of the things that I have this good friend of mine who's a commander down in DC, but we laugh at it. We see a resume of a guy who spent his whole career flying, and we're like, oh, look through your resume here, and I can see you're a pilot. with no other skills. They've not been to the staff. They haven't gone to school. They don't have an advanced degree. So, making sure you don't get yourself so locked into a stovepipe of whatever skill you do in the military that you lose context for the rest of the world. And if you're a pilot and want to go be an airline pilot, that's fine. But
Yeah.
my guess is most people involved in these kind of programs have broader ambitions than that. The second one is like you suggested. There's a lot of terms and explanations and decorations and accommodations and whatnot that mean a lot to us. That you served in this campaign, or you have this particular award or this medal. That, man, it just goes right over people, and they couldn't tell you. National Defense Ribbon from a Bronze Star if it meant their life. And it, obviously we know the difference because we've seen the people who make sacrifice and are rightly awarded those decorations. But that's something we need to. I would recommend you keep in check and be a little humble about that. Those mean a lot to you. They mean a lot to your brother in uniform. But the HR person probably isn't going to care much about it, or at least not understand it, I guess.
Yeah, Becky in HR doesn't know the hierarchy of the medals.
Yeah, or what what's a deployment mean? What does a school mean? All these things that matter to us, that they just don't to a lot of people in the civilian world because they just don't know. It's not that they don't care. It's not that they're not patriotic or support veterans. They just don't know.
Yeah, yeah, it's a you're not going to overcome that anytime soon,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Um, so like doing what you do you see some like industries or roles where veterans kind of automatically kill it? It's like, dude, this is such a great fit. How have you been overlooking this?
I can't say I do. I think it's so personality driven that I know people who've left the service and gone on to teach middle school, and they just absolutely crush that. They're great at it. They're patient. They've got great world context experience. They can coach. That's awesome. There's people who go on, to lead companies and go do research or get advanced degree. I mean, I think it really depends on what the individual skill set is and what their passion is. And I think making sure you are lining up your passion, interest, and family situation, all those kind of things with what that opportunity is probably more important than lining a particular job up with a particular MOS or AFSC. I think one of the things I would recommend to folks is you need to be, I guess, realistic and understand that even though you were a superstar in your particular job in the military, that may not translate directly into kicking butt day one at HP or IBM or wherever. It may take a step back to take a step forward, and you have to have some humility in there because it just doesn't translate directly, and you could potentially put people off if you're too forceful of that. Obviously there's some direct matches. Again, the aviation example. If you worked on a KC-10 in the Air Force, and then you go work for United Airlines working on DC-10s, that's pretty straight, and you're going to probably succeed pretty quickly. But a lot of the other stuff is probably going to take, you have to be willing to learn, take a step back, and then you'll get on a fast track pretty quickly. But it may not be a day one paycheck to paycheck 100% match right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, I use the example a lot of times, somebody comes into the Air Force at 33, the guy's CEO of a company, and then when he signs up, he's like, "Hey, I want to come in as a major." We'd laugh at him.
Yeah.
Like, "Nah, dude." And he's like, "Oh, I already had 1,000 people hired, this, that, and the other thing." But yeah, but you don't know the culture here.
Mhm.
You don't know it from the ground up. So on the flip side, expecting to come out and be made the director or VP of something is kind of unrealistic. We're not all like the guy from it was Jim Takelet from Lockheed, former Air Force, and now he's a CEO.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, he didn't come right out of the Air Force and into a VP role. I'm pretty sure. It took him some time. So I mean, how do you think that should approach the rejection on the job market side? Because a lot of times we don't get the explanation. So, I mean, how do we read in, because Becky from HR can't tell us why we didn't get the job.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a really good point is, I think, I read a lot about this stuff now is that people are, they apply, they go through multiple rounds of interviews and they just get ghosted, and no explanation, no letter, no, just no callback. So I can't imagine the frustration that must cause. And we strive to not do that. We give feedback to everybody we interview, whether it's positive, negative, or move forward or don't. I think one thing for folks to keep in mind is that it's going to happen. There's a job out there. They're posted to LinkedIn. They're on job boards. They're on company websites. For every job, I forget the stat, but there's probably, I think it's 75 or 80 applications that go into each job that are posted at most of these companies. And in today's environment, they use AI and scrubbing bots and God knows what else to glean off three-quarters of those. So um, it's not good news. It's not going to make anybody happy, but you got to expect it. You're going to find a job that you are perfectly qualified for word match. You probably work with that technology, know that company, you're in the town, everything, and they're going to not call you back. So I think having a little bit of humility and having a bit of that, stay calm and carry on attitude is probably key, and we're probably going to see some ups and downs in the economy over the next few years too. That's going to impact that as well. So, being a little bit realistic and not letting every rejection get to you. The couple of sports analogies I love. Being from Boston, I'm a big Ted Williams fan. The last guy to hit 406, he got out 6 out of 10 times he got to the plate. So that's not an exact analogy, but it's pretty close. That even success comes with failure. And the other one I just read in the paper the other day was one of the coaches from one of the NFL training camps says we're not going to lose this year. We're either going to win or we're going to learn. And that's I think that is a good way to look at this job search process. Is you either get the job or you learn. And yeah, maybe Becky's not going to call you back, but you can do some self-reflection. You can do some self-assessments. Get some feedback. I'd recommend tracking your progress, keeping a journal of where you applied, how you thought the interview went, what you thought you did well, what you thought you didn't do well, and using that to get better each day. And in the aviation world, we had grade books. You got a grade book when you started pilot training when you were 22 years old, and you kept a grade book. I did grade sheets until my second to last flight was doing upgrade rides. And, you can see, oh, he's really good at this. He's not so good at that. I need to work on that. And I would recommend you do that. Have some way to journal and document what's going well for you and what's not.
That's a great idea. That's one I hadn't really thought about. I've spoken to a few people who did that similar. They tracked every job, but not the journal side to say, oh, hey, I answered it this way. Boy, I realized an hour after that wasn't the right one.
Yeah.
Heidi, go ahead.
Hey, good morning.
Hi, Heidi.
Hey, thank you for taking the time to be with us. I was curious, your comment on things that don't translate from the military. So some of the schools that we go to and things like that. Is there a way to capture that still? Because we do get very unique leadership training in the military that I think is valuable. And I do have things like that on my, I think, LinkedIn, where it says I attended Senior Non-Commissioned Officer Academy. Is there a better way to put it so that it makes sense to the civilian world, but still captures the importance of what we learned?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll give you an example from my personal resume. So I had an opportunity to go through weapons school, which is the Air Force equivalent of Top Gun, and it sounds glorious. And no, we don't play volleyball and all that kind of goofy stuff in the movies, but Ernie's getting all excited there, so stop. But the actual name of the course is the Weapons Instructor course. So going out and trying to tell somebody how great I am at flying the A-10 and I can pull this many G's and fly upside down, no one cares about that. But telling somebody that I'm really good at instructing and can develop instructional plans built on a building block approach and have done that in a very technical and demanding environment is a much easier way for people to understand those skills that you may learn at some of those schools. So, my recommendation would be to take a look at the courses you've been through, kind of boil them down to what they really teach you. Are they really teaching you to shoot the M4? Or are they teaching you to do some other skill at a higher level? So if you can think through what, the NCO Academy or other places, leadership, communication, problem solving, boil those down and then present that as the solution as opposed to the military nomenclature. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfectly. And actually, I'm very impressed with your skills with the A-10. I love the A-10. Maybe the employers aren't, but I think it's cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I like that because, like, Senior NCO Academy, I didn't really think about it too much, but it's leadership. I mean, just like you said, it's leadership development, communications, planning. It's like, shit, I'm gonna make a change on that one. AJ, go ahead.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for being here. So coming from as an instructor, I was an explosive ordnance disposal instructor. Does Blue Tactical, I have two questions. Does Blue Tactical go out and demonstrate the equipment to allow people to get hands on and actually feel it out? Because coming from EOD, it's one thing to I was also a GPC card holder, so it's one thing to jump through the hoops on the card holder side to actually like
Mhm.
be allowed to purchase things, but it's a whole nother thing to like corral the cats and get the personalities
Yep.
together to actually agree like these are the gloves that we're buying, and there's no left and rights, like these are the gloves. um do y'all go out and like do a dog and pony essentially?
Yeah, so we follow what we call is a requirements or requirements based procurement process. So instead of someone comes to us and says, "Oh, I need a pair of gloves." Like, okay, what do you want to do with the pair? No, I want the 511, Tundra. I'm like, okay, well, what are you trying to do? Well, we're doing this, and this. So then, we try to take those requirements, break those down to key performance parameters, and then make a recommendation that goes back to, okay, well, instead of the 511 Tundra, have you considered the 511 Soldier Elite? Or I'm making up names here, but, and then, letting them try those on, letting them work those, do a field test, do a demo. So yeah, we absolutely believe in that process that, we, I'm looking out at our, kind of showroom here where we do a lot of demonstrations for body armor, medical supplies, things like that. I very, very rarely, unless it's a known customer with a known requirement, would we sell anything to anybody without them trying it out or at least having a conversation. So yeah, our team here, they have to know the products, they have to know the customers. We try to hire only military veterans with very particular experience or for former first responders, so that we had a big body armor contract recently with a large fire department in Connecticut. And in addition to the body armor, because that's a thing now that firemen get shot.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh my
uh,
God.
yeah, no, I mean, there was two firemen killed out in Idaho a couple of weeks ago, if I remember correctly. But in addition to
You don't have
just
to carry enough shit.
dropping off a bunch of body armor, we went down and provided 4 classes to firemen of how they can do CPR and basic their basic duties in the body armor and how their gear can interact and all those kind of things. So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
making an integrated solution that is not just the product that's defined by requirements, but the training, how you integrate that with other pieces of equipment, and making sure it doesn't just sit on the box. One of the things I remember from when I was a reservist National Guardsman in college, and I'd come back to do my drill weekends, and there'd be a brand new computer that was sitting on the desk, and we open it up, and it was this cool SunSpark 2000, and it could draw graphics and all sorts of cool pictures. And we'd play it for about an hour, then we'd have to go do some presentation or class, and we put it back in the box and it'd go on the shelf, and we'd never open it again because
Exactly.
there's
No
no
one knows how to use it.
yeah, exactly. So that's that resonates with me because I don't know how much those every National Guard unit got 3 of those, and they cost multiple thousands of dollars. So there was millions and millions of dollars in these computers that no one ever did anything with. So we really try to make sure that when we deliver a material solution, people know how to use it. It integrates with what they're trying to do, and it helps them accomplish their mission.
Okay, and that kind of leads into my second question, if I'm allowed.
Of course.
Uh, uh, have you thought about possibly pivoting into like fitness equipment, so you could be like a one-stop shop for like a bunch of these agencies? Like personally for EOD, like we have to the way the Air Force kind of like holds they clutch their money so tightly. They kind of give us like a few weeks to kind of just go execute everything.
Right.
And for the one-stop shop to be able to buy our safety equipment, our PPE, our uniform items, and gym equipment, because we have to procure and maintain our own gym equipment. That would be like a slam dunk company,
Yep.
that the source for the card holder.
That's not a particular line we've got into, but there's no reason other than we've never been asked for it. So we've sold everything from on cloud running shoes to non-electricity conducting sledgehammers and everything in between. So
Rad.
uh, we we listen to our customer, we go out and we'll negotiate and either develop the product ourselves, have it made for us, or partner with an existing OEM. But yeah, that's a great idea. I'll make a note of that, and that's something we could potentially add to our
I
repertoire.
know a guy who was prior EOD who's looking for a job. I got a lot of contacts.
Well, have your friend send me his resume. So
You got it.
Hey, AJ, send him my way. I'll get it to him.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no worries. Hey, so talk to me about a time you failed. I mean, how'd you use that as fuel? What did you
like
do to recover?
today or like in general?
Let's just go in general. I don't want to buttonhole you.
Yeah. So it's funny because I remember early on we had a line on a contract to do some training for one of the Air Force flying schools. We had folks we knew, great personal relationships. We were all excited to go knock this contract out of the park and win this $50 million contract. We're all going to retire on the beach, and we didn't have all of the past performance and essentially technical skills that were needed. So we realized we needed to partner with a larger company who had the BAs or Boeings of the world. So our expectation was we'd walk into Boeing, and I'm not, this is not the real company, but we'd walk into Boeing, we'd present them with our plan, we'd get half the work, they'd take half the work, and we'd be tremendously successful. Well, they looked at our plan, they loved our plan, they loved our contacts, everything we had was fantastic, and then they sent us over a subcontract, and we had 7.3% of the work. So I think part of that is forgetting, not understanding that everybody wants to be profitable, and you have to bring value to the fight, and you have to fight for yourself, or you're going to get pushed to the side. And this gets back to the my earlier comment about entrepreneurship and making sure you're bringing value, you're finding what your return is and going for that. So the lesson learned from that was before you settle on what you think you're going to get, make sure the rest of the world accepts the world according to your reality too. So
I reject your reality and substitute my own.
yeah, I see you. You're 50%, and I raise you by negative 43%. So
yeah, that's a rough one. So I mean, imposter syndrome. Talk to me about it, because I got no doubt there was times you felt it.
yeah, and it's funny because that's a term that comes up here a lot. One of the young kids who works for me, he claims he has it all the time, and he's fantastic. We all have it. Uncertainty's out there, and there's doubt, and there's days, as I say to my family, some days I get the bear, and some days the bear gets me, and it not always under my control. So the uncertainty is real. The thing that I fall back on, though, and this gets back to the questions that Heidi and I think AJ had as well, is you remember the things you've accomplished in uniform, whether that's EOD, whether that's going to some kick-ass school where you learned a lot, a deployment, some particular skill set, whatever that is. If you think of those accomplishments and put them in context of what that challenge is in front of you in the civilian world, can almost guarantee those challenges are going to fade to the wayside. I think of, can I fly a multi-million-dollar combat plane with 3 other planes on my wing at night in the weather in some crazy country? I went to weapons school. I can run a multi-million-dollar project at the Pentagon. If I can do all that stuff, I can walk into a room with a police chief or a hospital administrator and give them a sales pitch. And I don't need to be. I'm not an imposter. I may not know as much about fighting fires or doing open heart surgery, but man, I can solve their problems because I can listen, I can learn, and I've done things of similar complexity and similar challenge. So my guess is everybody on this call today has a similar sort of story, experience, deployment, school they've been to, they can fall back on and say, if I can do that, I can do this in front of me.
Yeah, that's the hell way of looking at it. So for folks transitioning today, what are some of your recommendations, outside of LinkedIn networking kind of stuff? Because we beat that to death, I'll be honest. What can you do to help that future path? Any unconventional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, networking, yes. I'm less and less a fan of LinkedIn these days, and not because I don't think it's a resource, but I find more and more trolling and political commentary and things that I don't necessarily think belong on there. But we can talk about that some other time.
It's getting a little Facebooky in places. Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever. Not the conversation here. So I would, I'd say, network. Find those groups, whether it's Whether you went to some school and there's an alumnus association, get involved with that. Get involved with reunions and email groups, social media groups. There's ways to get involved in network that don't necessarily a little bit outside of the normal or the norm. If you have an industry that you want to go into, if you're interested in drones or if you're interested in AI or whatever that is, start learning about that, because what you don't want to do is get to your terminal leave day and say, okay, I'm going to go be a drone pilot. Where do I start? That's probably a little late in the game, and you can get yourself a head start by doing that on weekends, free time, and maybe even, quite frankly, if you're in a job that has some flexibility where you can attend a conference or two, you can meet with folks in the industry. Use that last assignment, those last moments of your military career to start building awareness of that particular industry and getting a little bit smarter on that. I think another area that probably is a little off, maybe you haven't talked about, but define what personal success is to you. What really matters to you. Is it, for me, when I left active duty, it was being in Massachusetts, because that's where my family was from, my wife was from, my kids were here, they wanted to stay in school here. So could I have gone someplace else and been more successful quicker? Potentially, but that was one of the key metrics that mattered to me. So maybe it's where you're going to live, maybe it's the hours you work. You have a parent you have to take care of, or a kid you have to take care of. Whatever that is, I think defining those personal metrics of success are pretty key. So if you have to be around because you have you're a single parent, have kids to take care of, taking a job that's 75% travel probably isn't the right idea. So going into that and defining what personal success is, both work schedule, stress level, time away from home, all of those things. I think you do some honest, real thinking for yourself right off the bat. And then kind of the last, you probably covered a lot of this, but classes, certifications, anything that you've got skill wise, make sure that's current. Make sure you have a plan to keep that current as you transition, because the last thing you want to do is, hey, I'm a drone pilot, but your drone certificate expired 3 months after you left the military. Now you got to go start that process again. So, and I know there's those kind of professional certifications across multiple industries.
Makes sense. So talk about Blue Tactical. What are you doing now that makes like the real world difference in national security, vet employment, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So our unofficial motto is help the good guys win. So we want to help the good guys win. Blue, people ask me where we came up with the name. Blue is obviously, for those of you who've done, any kind of mapping or exercises, blue is the good guys. And tactical is, a way to achieve success. So that's where that is. We want to help the good guys achieve success. So, we go out, we work with fire departments, police departments, hospitals, DoD organizations, DHS, you name it, to help them find the goods, the materials, and the training they need to do their job. And that's really what we want to do. We want to match their actual requirements with material and training solutions to help them meet their mission objectives and use minimum resources. And that is how we go about business on a day-to-day basis. Excuse me.
So what do you think the coolest thing that you've done in that job is? Yeah, you weren't expecting that one.
Yeah, no, I wasn't. So we early on in the Ukrainian war, we had a contact over there who was asking us to source some medical supplies because we had done some of that, and he was looking for this particular oxygen generator. It's a battlefield oxygen generator, so that you can throw them on helicopters. You don't have to have the green tanks, whatnot. Pretty cool system. So we found some at auction. We bought them at auction. We had a couple of our techs fix them up, and then we sent them over. And about a month after we sent them, we got an email from a guy's wife in Ukrainian. We happen to have a Ukrainian translator on staff, and it was essentially, you saved my husband's life. He was injured. He was evacuated, and one of these things with your sticker on it came back. So, and I know we've done other stuff like that for police departments and DHS, but that was pretty cool. I'm a big believer in seeing your it's great to see the results of your work. And we still have the note, and she sent us this plate thanking us for what we did for them. So, we made a few bucks at it. I'm not going to say it wasn't profitable, but it was still cool to be involved with that.
Yeah, I mean, especially something like, it's not like, hey, I created a weapon system that just leveled, a brigade. Like, hey, I saw a problem and it here's the
Yep.
direct result. You know, you saved at least one life, and there, God only knows how many others after that.
Right.
I mean, that's something to kind of pat yourself on the back for. So my last question, unless anybody's got any questions. So what legacy do you want to leave behind for your company and fellow vets when it comes time to hang it up?
Like I said, I want to continue to serve the country, help the good guys win. When I get done here in a couple of years, 520, whatever that is, I want to make sure that Blue Tactical stays here in the same attitude and approach to business that I have, that we try to bring more capability, fewer resources, to get the job done. So trying to instill that as a culture is my kind of raison d'etre, if you would, as I look at the backside of my career.
Yeah, we all want to leave something better behind than we found it. That's for sure. I can respect that. Before I let you go, you have any closing thoughts, Drew?
No, this was great. I wish there was something like this when I was getting ready to walk out the door. I appreciate the couple of questions. If there are any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I pride myself on being available and being a network asset to veterans as they're leaving service. So if anything comes up, please send me a note, send me a text. I'll do my best to answer you in a timely manner and do what I can to help you.
My man, Drew Platt. Thank you very much for taking some time out of the day, chatting with these folks and dropping a little bit of wisdom and knowledge on them. Once again, thank you. I will get back to busting your chops via text later on, and then hopefully see you back again here soon. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks,
and
guys.
we'll be back here at the top of the hour if you guys want to take a quick break. Oh, hang on. AJ's got a question. And I lost Drew. Sorry, AJ.
I'm here.
Oh, you're here? Oh, yeah. Go ahead, AJ. He's still here.
I was just clapping. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Hey,
Thanks,
thanks, guys. All yours, Jordy.
Hey, how you doing? I got a quick question. Um, I'm trying to figure out how the connections tab on the actual events it's opened up because I can't see any events on the event on the connections tab. I can see all the foundation ones, but I can't see any of the connections one.
Ooh, don't know on that one. Are you? What are you talking about? Where are you at?
Right on your Seven Eagle homepage on the actual homepage itself. So when you're trying to see the events for the day, it'll show me the foundations ones, it'll show me all the events, but it won't show the connections ones. So basically, I have to go into the foundations meeting, ask to see if there's a link, and then I will link over, and somebody will send me a link over.
Oh, to here?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean it's to here. It's the same link every day. So if you've got it, just use that.
All right, not an issue.
Yeah, that'll keep it simple.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm doing my best.